If it feels too good too fast, slow down. Because sometimes what feels like a rare connection with someone or something is just intensity moving faster than your judgment can catch up. Welcome back to Signals and Standards with Suzie, where we talk about the things that can completely throw us off course in relationships and the mindset shifts that help us find our way back to ourselves. Today, we're talking about intensity. You know that feeling when you meet someone and everything happens so fast. The conversations are nonstop and the chemistry feels undeniable. Next thing you know, they're texting all day, making big promises, and suddenly it feels like you've known them forever. Or maybe you found yourself caught up in a situation that feels exciting, all consuming, electrifying, and impossible to stop thinking about. Most of us have experienced some version of this at one point or another. And when we're in it, intensity can feel like proof that it's real, that it's special, proof that we finally found what we've been looking for. But what if intensity isn't always a connection? What if some of the things we call chemistry are actually emotional stimulation? But what if the relationships that are healthiest for us don't always arrive with fireworks and a soundtrack? By the end of this episode, you'll understand why intensity can be so hard to resist, how to tell the difference between genuine connection and emotional overwhelm, and why consistency is often a much stronger sign of compatibility than chemistry alone. Stay with us. Welcome to Signals and Standards with Suzie, where we decode mixed messages, elevate your standards, and deliver practical insights that you can act on. I'm your Empowerment Coach Suzie, here to guide you from confusion to clarity, helping you reclaim your power and create the relationships and life you deserve. One of the biggest misconceptions about relationships is that the strongest feelings have to automatically mean the strongest connection. We have been conditioned to believe that if someone sweeps us off our feet, occupies our thoughts all day and night, and makes our heart race and give us butterflies every time their name appears on our phone, it must mean something significant, something real. We celebrate all the sparks. We romanticize those butterflies. We tell stories about instant chemistry and love at first sight. Because really, rarely do we hear stories about the slow, steady connection that quietly became one of the healthiest relationships of someone's life. But intensity and compatibility are not the same thing. Think about the difference between a flash flood and a river. A flash flood arrives with force. It gets your attention immediately. It feels powerful, dramatic. It's impossible to ignore. But it's often unpredictable and difficult to sustain. A river, on the other hand, it moves steadily. It may not create the same sense of urgency, might not make waves, but over time it shapes landscapes, it nourishes growth, it sustains life and proves its strength through consistency. Yet many of us have been taught to trust the flood simply because we can feel it more intensely. This is where psychology becomes fascinating. Research on love bombing has found that excessive early attention, constant communication, grand gestures, and accelerated emotional intimacy can sometimes be linked to controlling dynamics and narcissistic traits. Studies suggest that these behaviors can create a false sense of closeness by fast-tracking trust before a genuine foundation has had a chance to develop. In other words, what feels like an extraordinary connection may actually be an extraordinary amount of attention. That distinction matters because getting positive attention feels good. Of course it does. Being chosen absolutely feels good. Being admired always feels good. When someone seems completely captivated by us, it can light up parts of ourselves that have been waiting a long time to feel seen. It gives us that validation we've always wanted. I've been there. Every text message, every compliment, every declaration of how different we are from everyone else can create a powerful emotional rush. Our brains are wired to respond to rewards, and intense attention can become one of the most rewarding experiences we encounter. What many people do not realize is that we are often reacting not only to the person, but to how the experience makes us feel about ourselves. Research has also found connections between love bombing experiences, insecure attachment patterns, and lower self esteem. That does not mean there's something wrong with people who get caught up in these dynamics. It means they're human. If you've spent years questioning your worth, feeling unseen, or craving deeper connections and validation, of course intense attention can feel irresistible. It's not a weakness, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's normal. It's a normal human response to finally receiving something you've been longing for. I know because I've been there too. That wild and crazy intensity feels amazing. It just feels so good. The challenge, though, is that emotional intensity can sometimes create the illusion of emotional safety. Someone can make you feel wanted without truly knowing you. Someone can make you feel special without being consistent. Someone can make you feel chosen without actually being available for a healthy relationship. That's why the beginning can feel magical while the middle maybe feels a little confusing. One of the most interesting findings in relationship research involves the cycle of idealization and withdrawal. Some people come on incredibly strong. They create this sense of closeness and certainty only to pull back unexpectedly. The heat becomes cold. The affection becomes inconsistent. And that connection that once felt effortless suddenly feels like work. What happens next is where many people get stuck. So instead of stepping back and evaluating whether the relationship is healthy, they become focused on getting back what was there at the beginning, like being addicted to that feeling, that hit. They're not necessarily chasing the person anymore. Rather, they're chasing the feeling. Researchers have found that these cycles, they can create powerful dependency patterns because uncertainty itself keeps us engaged. We start telling ourselves that if we can just get things back to how they were in the beginning, everything will be okay. We become invested in recovering the high rather than assessing the reality. That's when we let go of our power and hand it to the other person. I think that's one of the hardest truths for people to accept. I know it was for me. Sometimes the beginning was not the relationship. Sometimes the beginning was the sales pitch for a used car that turns out to be a lemon. And before anyone gets uncomfortable with that statement, this is not about assuming bad intentions. Not everyone who creates intensity is manipulative. Some people genuinely get caught up in their emotions because they lack self-awareness. They confuse excitement with commitment. Some people are addicted to that high of meeting a new person they connect with, and they want to do it over and over again. The important thing is not diagnosing or overanalyzing the other person. The important thing, it's paying attention to the impact this all has on you, for you to be self-aware. So ask yourself, how do you feel when the intensity settles down? Secure, valued, clear? Perhaps you feel anxious, confused. Maybe you're constantly looking for reassurance. Why is it important to know? Because healthy relationships do not need us to spend all our energy decoding and analyzing them. The healthiest relationships are often surprisingly ordinary in the best possible way. They're built through consistency, through people doing what they said they would do. and through trust developing over time. It's not being demanded immediately. You gain someone's trust. That may not sound as exciting as the movies. It may not create that same adrenaline rush as someone declaring their undying devotion after 2 weeks. But real emotional safety rarely announces itself with fireworks. More often, it arrives quietly. It shows up in consistency. It shows up in reliability and feeling calmer instead of more confused. Remember, slow and steady wins the race. And perhaps that's the question worth asking ourselves. Have we been taught to mistake emotional activation for emotional connection? Because one creates excitement and the other creates trust. And trust is what allows love to last long after the excitement fades. If you're listening right now and someone immediately comes to mind, I want you to get curious rather than judgmental. This isn't about deciding whether someone is good or bad. It's about paying attention to how a connection is affecting you. So ask yourself this: is this relationship helping me feel more grounded or more anxious? Am I getting to know this person? Or am I getting swept up in how they make me feel? Because those are not always the same thing. One thing I encourage my coaching clients to watch for is whether the relationship can survive ordinary life. It's easy to show up when everything is exciting, to be attentive when there's no challenges, no disagreements, no responsibilities competing for attention. The real question is, what happens when life becomes inconvenient? Do they still communicate? Do they still follow through? Do their actions continue to match their words when the novelty wears off? I also want you to pay attention to yourself. If you find yourself checking your phone constantly, analyzing every interaction, feeling incredible one day and devastated the next, or needing frequent reassurance just to feel secure, don't ignore that. Sometimes we think those feelings are evidence that we care deeply. Sometimes they're actually clues that we're operating from uncertainty. I always tell people, if you have to ask or wonder about their intentions, you have your answer already. A healthy connection should not require you to constantly solve a mystery. Another thing to notice is whether the relationship is moving faster than trust has had a chance to develop. Are you sharing more than you normally would because the connection feels so intense? Are future plans being discussed before you've had time to see how this person even handles disappointment or conflict or stress or accountability? Emotional intimacy is valuable, but it's healthiest when it develops alongside evidence, not instead of it. One of the most empowering things you can do is to stop asking, how strongly do I feel about them? And start asking, how do I feel about myself when I'm with them? Do you feel calm, respected, secure? Are you free to be yourself, or do you feel like constantly trying to earn consistency, clarity, or maybe even looking for reassurance over and over again? Because real connection doesn't leave you chasing. It doesn't require you to decode mixed signals or hold your breath, waiting for the next moment of validation. Real connection allows you to relax into the truth of what's happening instead of constantly trying to figure it out. So if you're unsure about someone, don't focus on the intensity. Watch the pattern. Watch what happens over time. Watch how they handle the ordinary moments, not just the exciting ones. Because attraction can happen in an instant. Trust absolutely cannot and should not. And remember this: self-trust grows when you stop making decisions based solely on how a connection feels in the moment and start paying attention to what it consistently shows you over time. Choose what's aligned, not just what's exciting. Your future self will thank you for it. Years ago, I used to fall for the intensity trap over and over and over and over again. And I don't say that from a distance like I figured it out early. I was in it, fully in it. If it felt overwhelming, fast, all consuming, or like I couldn't stop thinking about it, or I felt like our souls were connected, I would tell myself, this must be fate. It must be totally soulmate energy. That this never happens to me kind of chemistry. And honestly, in the moment, it felt undeniably real. I would meet someone and everything would light up immediately. The conversations were constant, the attention felt flattering, the pace felt exciting in a way that made everything else fade into the background, and the energy was electric. And I would confuse that intensity for alignment. I would think that this has to mean something. How could it not? And don't get me wrong, there were moments where that felt fun and exciting. But what I learned, and mostly the hard way, is something that I now repeat often. A fire that burns too hot and too fast usually fizzles just as quickly. Because intensity can create a rush, but it doesn't automatically create a foundation. What I started noticing after enough experience and reflection was that the intensity was always available when things were easy, when there were no demands, no real life stressors, no need for consistency. But the moment real life entered the picture, something shifted. The energy that felt so abundant in the beginning started to disappear in the places where it actually mattered most. And that's when it hit me. What I thought was a connection was often just momentum without structure underneath it. That experience changed something for me. It taught me that being impressed is not the same as being aligned. Feeling chosen in a moment is not the same as being consistently chosen. And chemistry, no matter how strong it feels, is not a substitute for emotional reliability. Now, when I look back, I can see how easy it is to romanticize that intensity, especially when you're someone who feels deeply or has learned to equate emotional highs with emotional truth. But real connection doesn't just show you how fast it can rise, it shows you how well it can hold. I want to leave you with something simple to ground everything we talked about today, because this just isn't about relationships. It's about learning to notice what pulls you in and whether it actually supports you long term. This is your reminder to start valuing what is steady over what's loud. So say this with me. I am drawn to stability, not stimulation. I am drawn to stability, not stimulation. I am drawn to stability, not stimulation. Let this be more than something you hear once. Let it become something you come back to when intensity tries to convince you it means alignment. Because real confidence isn't built in emotional highs. It's built in what stays consistent when everything else settles. Remember, intensity has a way of convincing us we found something rare because it takes up so much space inside us. It speeds everything up, heightens emotion, and can make early moments feel like undeniable proof. But what feels convincing in the moment isn't always what holds up over time. What actually reveals the truth of a connection isn't how quickly it escalates, but how it behaves when life stops being effortless. Consistency is where you see character. It's where you learn whether someone's presence is steady or situational, whether their care is anchored or performance-based, whether you're meeting a person or experiencing a pattern. So when something feels consuming, pause long enough to step outside of the emotional rush and look at the pattern it creates. Not just how it starts, but how it sustains. Because clarity rarely comes from intensity itself. It comes from what remains when the noise settles. And often, the relationships that are easiest to trust are the ones that don't require you to constantly interpret them. Thanks for joining me today. Here's your big takeaway for today. Falling for intensity can feel like clarity, but it often speaks louder than it proves. What pulls you in quickly isn't always what can hold you well. Real discernment isn't about chasing the strongest feeling in the room. It's about noticing what stays steady when life gets ordinary, when it gets inconvenient or difficult or real. You've been listening to Signals and Standards with Suzie. For more grounded empowerment and relationship conversations, catch the podcast on your favorite platform or connect with me at powercoachsuzie.com. Until next time, don't confuse emotional intensity for alignment. The real signal isn't how fast it starts. It's how consistently it shows up when the moment isn't performing for you anymore. See you next time. For daily inspiration and practical advice, find me on social media at Power Coach Suzie. Got questions or ideas for the show? Head to powercoachsuzie.com where you can connect with me, explore the blog, or learn more about what I do. This is Suzie signing off. Until next time, keep reading the signals and never, ever lower your standards.